Rocking the Journey podcast. I'm Debbie Binner, and today I'm really excited to be, because we've had such a laugh just before coming on camera. So I just think this is going to be such a joyful interview. But I'm joined today by a new writer, and it's a real passion of mine, supporting female writers. So welcome, Denise Chilton.
Thank you so much. It's lovely to be called a writer.
You are a writer. And so I just want to get that out there, that you've written a book called Suddenly Single. Now, I have to admit, the publisher, Splendid Publications, would not let me see the whole book. So it's undercover. But I have seen a synopsis of it and the chapters. So I can't wait. So when is the book published? So
we're working to a date of the 17th of May this year. So I'm really excited. It's really interesting when you said about a writer, because I'm really still getting used to that name. I was told a long time ago I wasn't very good at English, and I'd love my English teacher. That kind of limiting belief, you're not a writer. Yeah. So it's lovely to think that actually I am, and I've overcome that. So
you certainly are. And the book looks amazing. So first of all, it's called Suddenly Single, so a really good clue about what the book's about. And something that with our community, we get talked to so much about this, about how, loneliness, how to live on your own, that kind of thing. I was just looking at the stats. 35% of the UK population is single, and that is likely to really escalate in the next 10 years. So I'm sure you'll have some really great tips about coping with being single. Coping, I think kind of not coping, because it's just living a full life, but not necessarily in a partnership, I think it's most importantly. But I want to start, Denise, by your story, because your personal story, I read the first bit of it, and I have to say I shed a little tear, because it kind of, I think, we've all had that heartbreak. So start off telling us about what happened to you.
Okay, so I think it started a little bit before the book, and I think that's important to say. So I started my we all have a number of journeys in life, don't we? But one of them kind of started about 3 years before my 40th birthday, and I was working in the corporate world, and life was really good. I had a really good job. I was with a partner. We were very much in love. I'd had a promotion, all that sort of, dream sort of stuff. And I was asked a question by one of our HR directors about life goals, and I can, it's one of those pivotal moments in life, and you think, gosh, I've never even thought about life goals. Yeah. And she said that when she was 50, that she was going to write a book and live in France. And I remember walking back to my desk thinking, oh my gosh, what am I going to do when I'm 50? And when I'm 80 and everything's drooped, and you're in the old people's home, what's your legacy? And I remember going back home and talking to my partner and went, I need to get out of here. I was working for a large American bank. And so 6 months later I did, and I bought a little coffee cart, and it was a little Piaggio truck, and I did events, and it was when Starbucks and Costa's wasn't on the high street. And so I went through this big life transition. I went from this amazingly well-paid job where I could buy Clarins to not so much money, where I could go to Superdrug. Not that there's anything wrong with either. And it was just like this amazing. And actually, I took my eye off the ball in terms of my relationship, if I'm really honest.
So you were in a relationship with a guy, about to get married? Or?
Yeah, so on my 40th birthday, so I went through this transition of a career transition. And then on my 40th birthday, he proposed and we got engaged. And it was just really great until 6 weeks later, when he said, I don't think I love you anymore. And I was like, I'm sorry. So it was almost like, no, this can't be true, because you have this kind of
had there been any clues, Denise? Was this completely out of the blue, or had you been aware?
Hindsight's a really great thing, isn't it? And I think one thing as a woman is that we're very, very instinctive. And I talked to this in the book. And actually, there were some very early warning signs. So up until that point, there was a couple of, you know, that gut feeling that we get. I talk about a sixth sense in the book. You know, when you know somebody very, very well, you know when they're not telling the truth. You might not have all the facts, but you just know when something is not quite right. And at that time, and it was way before I do what I do now in terms of coaching, I didn't really trust that instinct, because my instincts were saying, something's changed here. It was very subtle. But the logic is going, well, you've just got engaged, so don't be ridiculous. And my friends.
So were you kind of trying to brush it down and ignore it?
Yeah, and you know, there were some very slight little clues, like half an hour late back from work. You know, he wasn't a going out type person. He didn't drink at all. So, oh, I'm going out tonight on a night out. Right, he doesn't go on night out. So, you know, and there were just those little things that kind of built up really over time until over a period of time. It was quite funny from that. I don't think I love you anymore. I mean, there's no such thing as I don't think. It's either you do or you don't. You know,
there's no back from that, is there? As soon as someone said that, there's only one way for that to go, isn't there? And come back.
Yeah, and when you've never been through the experience like I had, obviously I've been dating in my younger days, and you know, you get your heart broken, but this was like this was going to be significant partner. So you don't really think about that. So anyway,
so take me through that, because I have a couple of friends going through this at the moment with the husband just suddenly waking up one day and saying exactly that. You know, I don't love you anymore. I want to go off in a different direction. And I've seen the utter devastation that these women have gone through, like really deep down affected their confidence, everything. It's just been lost loads of weight, and you know, really strong women. It's I find it just so, and a bit powerless of how to help somebody in that way as well.
100%. That's exactly why I wrote the book, because I didn't have a manual to go through I had no idea what to expect. And you know, when we kind of had something to grasp onto, or a little bit of hope or something. So certainly in my experience, what I found was that I got wrapped up in putting so much energy into trying to understand what's going on, what could I do. It was almost like pushing water up a hill. It was, or the other phrase I love is jelly on the walls, you know, and you're kind of working with this individual who's not giving you any
And
clues.
Did you immediately, as a woman, immediately turn it around, rather than thinking, okay, that's fine, he's changed his mind, so that's not a problem? Did you immediately start to think, what's wrong with me?
Oh, 100%, yeah, 100%. So I took the responsibility, even though he'd made the choice, you know, he'd obviously said this thing. Now, what was quite interesting is that over the period of time, it wasn't one of those, you know, instead of saying, well, let's talk about this, and is there someone else, which I kind of did, but it was all denied. So of course you believe them, even though you don't really. So you believe what you want to hear. Well, he said it's okay. There was a period of about 6 months where it was just like, and the women that I work with, and you know, people listening to us talking today will recognize it was like that walking on eggshells.
Yes.
And that sick feeling that you feel like that, it's just a sick feeling, and you carry that around every day. What's he going to be like today? And this is not you know, this was a nice bloke. You know, this wasn't a bloke who had a reputation for being, you know, a narcissist or anything like that. This is kind of what I call the normal, whatever normal means. And it's really interesting, because it was so much easier for him if he'd have gone, look, I've met somebody else, let's sort it out. I would have been so much more relieved. And I didn't find out till, like, even though I knew, I didn't know for 3 months after he left. When he then
so there was somebody else involved.
Oh yeah, 100%. And you know, I'll share this because this is kind of really interesting in these times. So we're talking 14 years ago this happened.
Right.
And he had this affair with this girl and it didn't work out. And when we went into, I never met her, I don't know who she is. When we went into lockdown last year, I got a message on social media from this lady whose name I didn't recognize. And it was her.
Yeah.
And she said, you don't know me, but I was, you know, I had an affair with your partner, and every day I've lived with the guilt of that. And I'm now living, with, she was married with a young child, and I've realized the impact of what I've done. And I just wanted to say sorry, and please choose to ignore this email. And I thought, well, this isn't for me to forgive her. You know, we've all moved on a lot.
Did that help? Did it help?
It didn't. I think because I was so far over it, it didn't. It was more, that for me said more about her journey and what she was going through.
Yeah.
You know, we've all moved on such a long way. So, and it kind of, in a way, Debbie, it made me realise, well, I mean, I knew I was over it from such a long time ago, but actually, gosh, fancy carrying all that around. And I think I thought it was interesting about her guilt about doing that to another woman.
Yes, that's really interesting way to think about it, isn't it? Because you always, the other woman is always painted as a kind of the terrible one, but I guess it's complicated than that.
And it was a kind of stereotypical break in terms of, you know, she was 18 years younger than him, so he was, you know, we were in our 40s. I think she was in her early 20s at the time. So from what I'd sort of found out, so it was I just thought it was quite interesting.
So Denise, so then moving on, so you've had this breakup, so your kind of future of how you've imagined it has completely changed. You're on your own. What do you do now?
Well, you read my book. That was a good one. So it was, I think there's a number of stages that you go through. There was kind of what I call those early days. And in those early days, it is when you're kind of, you feel your heart's in your boots, and it's like, I felt like there was like this physical pain, as if somebody had put a knife in and was twisting it. And I couldn't kind of get my head around what that was. So there was kind of that own personal experience. There was a great deal of...
Did you still feel you were in love with him at that point? Did you still have emotions?
Yeah, I think there was, at the early days, there's this hope, well, he'll just see sense and come back, you know, even though, you know, this is just a phase and this isn't really happening. I think I felt shame. I think as a woman, you know, I was brought up so I was born in the 60s, you know, early 60s, you know, success was you get engaged and then you get married and then you have children, and that wasn't my journey. And my mum died when I was 16, so I had responsibility for looking after a brother and a dad, and so life was quite upside down.
But tell me more about that shame, because that is a real, and that breaks my heart as a woman. Because relationships do change, don't they? Do end, and people's feelings change. Why would you feel shame because of that?
I just felt, I mean, shame. You know, I love Brené Brown's work on shame in terms of feeling that, you know, shame is I'm not good enough. And actually, it wasn't that I didn't feel good enough, but I did, because I didn't have all the information, Debbie. I didn't know what other people knew. So I think that was the shame. What would people think? And you know, there were obviously people knew that there'd been something going on that obviously I wasn't party to. And I also I was left to explain to people what had happened. So what happened? Well, I have no idea. Well, you got engaged a few months ago.
You're the least, you're in the whole kind of act of what was happening. You had the least reason to feel, because I always think with infidelity, it's that breakdown of trust, and you're taking the decision making out of somebody else's hands because they don't have all the facts. So it really interests me that the woman is the one that kind of turns it back on themselves and doesn't, you know, kind of, actually, I've done nothing wrong here. It's just
Exactly. And it was, and it's funny, and I talked to this in the book about people, all people's opinions come out then about the person you were with. And my dad, who I love to bits, he said, honestly, I didn't think it was going to last more than 6 months when you got with him anyway.
Dads are lovely.
Aren't they lovely? And I was thinking, oh my gosh, if he does come back, how are we going to manage that?
Yeah.
So, you know, so you go through those early days, and I was very vulnerable as well as a woman.
So Denise, I was going to say something, because you said something that was really poignant just now, and I don't want to skip past it. You said you lost your mum at 16, which is a horrible, horrible age. I lost my mum at 19, so I understand that. Do you think when your partner left like that, that recreated some of those feelings of loss that you had from beforehand? Yeah,
100%. I think dealing with a loss at 6, well, a loss of your mum at any age, and it's interesting, I just went through that because, you know, it happens to you, you have no other way to deal with it. And I just stepped into her shoes, and I think absolutely, Debbie, is that actually when you have a loss, I think it triggers other loss. And I think that deep sense of abandonment. She died of cancer. It was all very quick. It was like we were the 2.2 children family, you know, things like that. She was a keep fit teacher, all that stuff that you know, and all of a sudden and actually I think that's really shaped who I am over time, and made me more you know, I do a lot of work with women now, and it's
so tell me about this, because you've gone on and you've retrained, because so you left the big corporate world, retrained to be a life coach, specialising life coach, is that what I should call it?
So so most of the work I do is with women, what I call you know, women who are in some sort of professional or personal transition, and so, and I kind of came full circle with that. And what happened was, which kind of led into the book, what I was noticing is the women that I were coaching were coming up in relationships. They came for career coaching, and then all of a sudden out of the blue came well, I've got this relationship, or I'm attached to someone who's not emotionally available for whatever reason. And I was like, why are these patterns are occurring? Recognized it in myself. And then thought, I need to write a book on this, because obviously going through the coaching journey, I then had some tools to help me understand I'm in a process here, an emotional process, and actually it doesn't have a time. I could change that time if I work with it. And then I just also wanted to write a book that women would go, oh right, I understand what's happening to me, and you know, so that's why
let's take from the professional side of things, because that is so fascinating. That, you know, I've certainly seen that in my life as well, that women can't, I know this is your generalizing, but just females may be more emotional, but often their issues are relational, and definitely I've noticed that tendency of self-blame. So rather than looking at it as, which my partner would, much more practically, oh well, that's not working out, and doesn't take it to heart, that it's immediately goes back to what's wrong with me. So say we were looking at you, 40-year-old woman, going back to your 40-year-old self, and someone has come to you and the future they'd imagined completely gone overnight. So where do they start?
They start with being really gentle with themselves and starting with the emotion. That's a starting point, because I had a client this last week absolutely in that state, what I call the hopeless state. Can't even think logically, and actually it's about really trying to be gentle with yourself, and I don't mean woo woo, I mean how are you talking to yourself here, you know? Are you being gentle with yourself talk? Are you being gentle with yourself? Are you taking what do you need to do right today?
Because that's really interesting, isn't it, Denise? Because if it was a friend, like, I'm sure most people would be saying, God, this is dreadful, this has happened to you, just how can I look after you? But again, I've heard these women say, you know what, I'm too fat, I'm too this, I'm too that. The last things you should be saying when your soul has been so hurt.
absolutely. I think self-care is the bit that actually, because that's the bit that actually starts to make you feel more confident, and I'm enough to have those conversations. And I wish, if I was turning the clock back, if I'd have been more, I don't think I'm in love with you. Okay, let's have a conversation. Like, let's come on, Denise, man up here, or woman up, whatever it is that you want to say. That's the bit. But actually, it is for me around, you don't have to make any decisions right now. What do you need right now? And actually, for me, it's being with that emotion, because what happens is very often people push it away. They might use distraction techniques, and that's fine to a certain extent, but actually that's not going to go away. So what do you need to do to get the strength to either have the difficult conversation, to trust yourself more, and actually to make the this is about you. What do you want out of this? What do you want? And it's a bit, what can you control? Because you can't control what's going on over here, but you can control the decisions that you make and what's okay for you right now. So for me, it's baby steps, but I usually, if I'm working with someone, I take them where they are.
Yes, yeah. Now the other, because I've seen the chapters of your book, so the other chapter I thought was quite interesting, and we've started lots of discussions with our community around this, dating. So, and that tendency which some people have of kind of, so this relationship's ended, jump straight into another relationship. So what's your kind of professional and personal advice on?
I haven't. So it's a really interesting one. So I don't do the dating thing. It's not my kind of. I've obviously I watch it from afar. I'm a bit of a it's quite interesting. I've got a number of friends on apps, and they do this whole jump in, and what I see is that women jump in really quickly because they don't actually want to go through the heartbreak. So a great relationship's just split up, and 3 months later I'm getting married to someone else. And then it doesn't work out, and it's getting in that cycle. And I think dating, I think one of the advice, if there's anyone thinking of stepping into that arena or is in that arena, is get really clear about what you want from a relationship, because the relationship in your 40s and 50s, is it the same one that you want in your 20s? And I think what happens is we have a tick list. Are they good with, have they got this? Oh, their eyes are a different colour. I can't go out with someone who's got brown eyes, because, or I've got a friend and I love her to bits, but she's very particular about how tall they've got to be. So, and I'm like, what's really going on here? So I think it's about getting really clear on what does a great and I ask the question, what does a great relationship look like? Because actually, the most important relationship is the one you have with yourself, and if you're okay, then anything's a bonus. So
do you think as well, I mean, I think that and again, I'm born a similar year to you, that I don't know if we were brought up to kind of think you had to have you had to be married and all this kind of thing. And certainly as I've got older, I have realized you've actually first, before you go near anyone else, have to be most comfortable by being on your own, because otherwise you'll keep trying to kind of fulfill something that you're missing. So you'll always be vulnerable to, what somebody else is doing.
Absolutely.
And that important, if I could drill it into young women, is just be comfortable with yourself first of all.
It's interesting. When I wrote the book, so it took me about 12 months to write the book, and I wasn't dating at the time, and I actually and I'm not dating at the moment, and I've done it kind of on purpose, because what I find with some of the self-help type books is, oh, well, I went through this experience, and then, and look at my happy ever after, and I've got this amazing relationship now, and I haven't.
Right, so tell me about that, because that's really interesting. So you have chosen now to be single?
Yeah, for now, and actually, and I'm not ruling it out, but I wanted women that when they get to the end of the book, my happy ever after is the life that I've created for myself. So it's not always, it's very fulfilling. I've got work that I really love to do. It's very aligned with my values. I get to work with and meet some amazing women and help them and support them. I've got some amazing friends. Sometimes it's a bit lonely and sometimes I get a bit sad, but I have never compromised myself. And I wanted women to read the book and go, oh, she hasn't got someone at the end of it. So right, there's another way. And that's the impact I want it to have, because there is another way. And
tell me some of the pros. Tell me the pros and cons of being single.
So the pros, so I've got some really strong values around being independent, being flexible, having choice, when we always have choice. And I think that people say, I've got a friend and she says, oh, I love your life. I said, you've no idea what my life's like. And she said, yes, but you can just do what you please. And I was like, well, if you're in a relationship, surely you should be able to do to an extent. I guess there's compromises. So I think from there's something for me around I feel very empowered as a woman on my own, and I think actually going through that journey really I had to pull things out of me I didn't know I could do, and go through vulnerabilities, things going wrong in the house and builders turning up and trying to rip you off for £300 to change your plug, and you you write the check because you're kind of going, well, whatever.
But that's a serious point, isn't it? Of dealing with kind of things like that. It can be quite intimidating.
I think so. And then the con, one of the things that was really interesting, which really did make me feel vulnerable, and it had been not something I would have ever predicted. Some years ago, I was quite ill. I got pancreatitis, and I was just and it was an unusual case. And I remember the doctor called me and said, we need to get you to hospital now. Can you get your husband to take you to hospital? And I went, I haven't got a husband. And I put the phone down and I was like, oh, right, okay. And I live in a rural village, so it's no problem, we'll get the ambulance. So they sent the ambulance, and of course I thought, well, so I rang my friend and said, can you put my bin out tomorrow, because I'm going to hospital, I've got pancreatitis. That was like the first thing. And she's like, oh my gosh. And I was like, it's fine. And I remember being in A&E and thinking, oh, it would be really nice if there was somebody there just to have you back. And I think sometimes when I've had moments of things that I'd really like to celebrate, and I love my friends, I love my family, but sometimes it would just be nice to have somebody who thought you were pretty cool and had your back. And they are the things that I miss. But again, it's the pros and cons to everything, isn't it?
So give us the pros then. What are the pros?
So again, being flexible, being on my own. I mean, I've had some amazing opportunities through work, which I've never really had to discuss with it. I went out to Qatar to work in a hospital to do some work with women medical healthcare professionals. I've run a retreat over in Portugal for young women with a Dutch lady. I've holidayed on my own. I've been on holidays with friends. I've done traveling on my own. I've really, one of the proudest things I've done is I've got a young niece who's in her 20s who went off to America and did her degree. Just took herself off at 18 and said, I think I'm a real inspiration. And I thought, gosh, I don't have children of my own, but she counts me as a real role model. And what would I do? And I think if that's a tiny little impact of being single, and that there's a demonstration of that there is another way, and you can still be enough. That's fine.
Still be enough. That's lovely. Denise, thank you so much for sharing your story. Your book, Suddenly Single, it's out. When's it out again? Sorry.
17th of May.
17th of May, splendid publications. And I can't wait to read it, I've got to say. A joy to speak to you.
Thanks very much.
So much.